Double J, Jeff Jarrett, here to tell you a little bit about the nonstop savings happening over here at SaveWithConrad.com. Are high credit card balances holding you down on the card? If you're looking to give a guitar shot to your credit card debt or give your home the push it deserves with some upgrades and remodeling, you need to go to SaveWithConrad.com. That's right, SaveWithConrad.com. Conrad and his team are routinely helping My World listeners save $500, $600, $700, even $800 a month. Oh, did I mention you get to skip your next 2 house payments? Take a cue from the last outlaw, because if anybody knows how to get the bag, it's me. Strut on over to SaveWithConrad.com today and see how much money you can save for free. That's right, it's SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Woo!
Welcome to Something To Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Well, you know.
That's not a rib.
She pooted.
Is that a rib?
No, yeah, amigo.
There's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
Fuck you, Bruce.
I love you.
Give me double cheeseburger, double cheese, double mayo, double onion, motherfucker.
Bruce Prichard. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce is on vacation. He's taking the family for a well-deserved holiday below the border. Hope he's having a good time, and of course, I hope you are looking forward to celebrating the 25th anniversary of one of the most iconic moments in wrestling history. Not just WWE history, but wrestling history. Of course, I'm talking about King of the Ring 1998, and you might not remember that show, but none of us will ever forget Mick Foley flying off the cage in Pittsburgh. I can't believe it. The 25th anniversary is right around the corner. And next week, Mick Foley and I are going to sit down and actually talk about that iconic moment in long form on Foley is Pod. We're dropping it on the exact anniversary, 25 years to the day. So be sure to check out Foley is Pod next week. But today, we're going to recap the time that Bruce and I broke down King of the Ring 1998. The entire show, top to bottom, a first blood match with a guy who wears a red mask, and how it almost didn't happen. You see, The Undertaker came in injured. Nobody ever talks about that. Stone Cold Steve Austin was hurting for certain. My man was working with a staph infection in his elbow. What a time it was here. The summer of 1998. They finally toppled WCW. The 83-week streak has come to an end, and now it's all about the Attitude Era. Stone Cold paving the way. Without further ado, let's get to it, man. A little remix of King of the Ring 1998 right here on Something to Wrestle. Bruce Prichard. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
Man, what do you always say? Busy as a one-arm paper hanger?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, okay. Well, something like that. I'm hanging paper with one arm.
Well, I tell you what we're doing. We're giving ourselves high fives and pats on the back because we had a tremendous episode last week on Sable. We had lots of fun talking about Sable, and it's on track to set some new download records for us, and that caught me off guard. But it does prove, 20 years later, man, she's still over like Rover.
It is absolutely incredible. It just kind of goes to show that the audience from then that everybody was talking about, they were talking about her then. She was over then and still over today.
Bruce, I feel like it's time, man. We should just get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about King of the Ring. We're right here on the 20-year anniversary as you and I tape this. When you're listening on the 29th, yesterday was the 20-year anniversary. What a historic show this is. Am I right, Bruce?
I think it goes down in history probably as Mick Foley's defining night and one that he will never, ever forget. But, you know, even going back, the last 2 matches on this show were pretty damn good. And I enjoyed going back and watching this one.
No doubt about it, man. It's one heck of a card. It is a tremendous pay-per-view. I can't recommend it enough. It doesn't get talked about as much because of the one big match, and of course we're going to get there. But there's so much other stuff on here. So if you haven't already, go fire up the WWE Network one day this week and watch King of the Ring 98. As we said yesterday, was the 20-year anniversary. It goes down at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Pittsburgh has always been really a hotbed for wrestling, or at least it feels that way, whether it was, WWF or even, WCW and ECW. They had a lot of shows there, and some of the greats, in the industry, whether it's Bruno Sammartino or Kurt Angle, a guy I grew up on, Shane Douglas, Larry Zbyszko's more in your day, but even the guys on TV now, guys like Corey Graves and Elias, they're all from Pittsburgh. But for some reason, I feel like Pittsburgh sort of gets glossed over in wrestling history. Why don't you think Pittsburgh has a bigger reputation?
I think that when people were covering the Northeast and they were covering wrestling for the magazines, especially back in the day, New York and Madison Square Garden, that was the center, and that was the center of the world. And I think a lot of people still consider New York the center of the world. So Pittsburgh was kind of also. You had New York, you had Philadelphia, you had Boston, and Pittsburgh was kind of on that fourth rung of the ladder, if you will. But it was a strong wrestling market, and as you just mentioned, man, some of the greatest of all time, the great Bruno Sammartino hails from Pittsburgh. Kurt Angle is a Pittsburgh native, Olympic gold medalist. So it's produced some of the top talent ever in the wrestling business, and it was always a good draw for us all the time, really.
It just feels weird to me that, whenever people talk about big wrestling markets, it feels like even in that state, people talk about Philadelphia more so than Pittsburgh, but what a great history it has. So let's talk about the actual day of event here, because in my research, I found that you guys actually did a party right outside of the building just to create some buzz and some hype. You guys don't do that anymore, but back in the day here in this era, you were trying to, I guess, essentially have like hype parties right outside the building. What can you tell us about those?
Well, the idea was to get people there, and we were having, I don't want to say that we were having problems, but there became an issue with people coming in and being in their seats when we came on the air. So we would have parties. We would get people there early to get them involved, man. You would have meet and greets, you would have games and just a DJ having a good time outside, and you'd do talent, surprise stuff out there. But it was a way to get people to the venue early so that when it was time to fill up the arena, feed them in and get them seated.
Well, let's talk about where business is here, because you guys have really started to catch fire here. Of course, business has been up for a while, but starting in April, you started to actually win in the ratings war, and here we are in June. But let's talk about just where we are financially. Your average attendance in June of 97 was 5,687. Here in June of 98, you're up 68.2% to 9,568 fans on average. Huge jump there. But your gate is way up too. In June of 97, you were averaging around 93,000 at the gate. Here you're up to 179,000. So a 92% jump. And you weren't selling out very many house shows in June of 97, only like 5.9%. Here, 46.7% of your shows are sold out. Your average television rating on cable is also up 58%, from a 1.7 to a 2.7. Business is up no matter where you look. The metrics tell the same story. Business is up. You had been in the company for over 10 years at this point, except for that little hiatus. Is this the hottest it was the entire time you were there? Up to that point?
Up to this point, it definitely was. Maybe not so much as in 1987 when I first came in, but yeah, this was red fucking hot. Everywhere we went, it was on fire. Stone Cold Steve Austin was the hottest star in the business at the time, and everybody and everything was turning to gold. So it was a really good time. We were on top of the world, and man, business was good. And it was also during a time that everybody was making money, so everybody was feeling good.
Obviously, whenever something works like this, it really is a team effort. And when business is up, it's usually not just one thing. And I do find it funny because sometimes when business is down, people like to pin it on one guy. But when it's up, everybody wants to spread the credit around. A great example of this is whenever people say, oh, Diesel was the worst drawing champion in history. But like here, when business is really hot, a lot of people are debating. Is it Vince Russo? Is it the Mr. McMahon character? Is it the Austin character? Is it all of it together? And I'm curious what your takeaway on that is. If you had to sort of pinpoint one thing above all else, obviously it all contributed. Obviously it was all a factor, but was there one single thing that you could put your finger on and say, well, this is what got us there, really?
Man, Austin was red hot. Austin was that guy that was steering the ship, and Austin was the one that people were paying money to come out and see. So if you were only going to pin it on one guy, who was drawing the houses and what was everybody talking about that was new and that was different, it was Stone Cold Steve Austin. But make no mistake about it, it was a team effort. It's a team effort when you lose. It's a team effort when you win. So when things are doing the shits, it's not just one thing going wrong or one guy with bad ideas. It's bad ideas. It's bad talent. It's bad management. And then when it all works together, it's a perfect storm and does well. And that's what was happening here.
Let's talk a little bit about some behind the scenes finagling. Let's go back to May and we'll sort of set the stage for our June pay-per-view here. In mid-May, WCW filed a lawsuit against you guys and the USA Network. And this is essentially a countersuit of sorts. I mean, it's almost identical to what you guys sued them for back in 96. Here, WCW is asking for $2 million in damages because they're saying that you guys have infringed on their trademarks, much like you sued them for Razor and Diesel. Well, now they're saying, you've done that when you invaded WCW. So we've talked about that invasion angle a little bit here, and we'll table the rest of that talk for another time. But when you find out that after you guys had sort of invaded CNN Center and, of course, the arena in Norfolk, Virginia, and now they're suing, what's your reaction?
Well, I think that initially it's like, what the fuck? When you're on top, everybody's going to sue you. And WCW was on top and we were suing them. But also they had breached agreements and they were using our trademarks. We were using, old footage. We were using, Hulk Hogan from the time that we had him and that we did own those images. We did own that because it was WWE property. So their lawsuit didn't have nearly as much, as far as anything to stand on, really. And they were just kind of countersuing because they were getting their ass kicked at the time and didn't know what else to do.
I do feel like it's a little bit like, well, they sued us, so we're suing them type of deal. I mean, more so than it actually being based in reality. Anyway, maybe that's me being a homer. Let's talk about Off the Record, which is a TSN show that I got to tell you, as a kid in Alabama, I heard about all the time because you guys clearly had a great relationship either with TSN or Landsberg or something caused you guys to book guys all the time on Off the Record. And you guys did tremendous ratings whenever Bret Hart or Vince McMahon were on there, but it blew it out of the water when Austin was on around this same time. It's the largest rating they ever had on that show up to that point. What can you tell us about the Off the Record Landsberg relationship with the WWE?
Landsberg was their big talk show guy. He was their Bill O'Reilly of sports, and TSN was the Canadian network. Carl DeMarco, who was the president of WWE Canada, had a good relationship with them and always wanted to strengthen that. And Landsberg was nice to us. I mean, he would put our guys on. He was fair, and it was great exposure for us. So whenever he had a WWE talent on, his ratings went up and our exposure went up. And in Canada, it was a good marriage, but he wasn't an asshole.
Let's talk about JYD. This is a bit of a sad news here that we have to cover, but I don't know when we'll talk about JYD again because you didn't spend a lot of time with him in his WWF run. You came in towards the end, but he passes away in early June. He's killed in a car accident and he's only 45 years old. What can you tell us about your time with the Junkyard Dog? I don't know when we'll talk about him again.
JYD was probably one of the most charismatic stars that ever been around, man. Dog, even in the dressing room, he just commanded the locker room. He commanded it just the way that he carried himself. He was a hell of a football player back in the day. But Dog was one of those unique talents that drew money everywhere that he went. And he could come in He could come in the opening match and he could be more over than your main event, no matter where the hell you wanted to bring him in. I was around JYD a lot Mid-South, and JYD left to go to New York and go work for Vince. Bill Watts was beside himself when JYD left, had no idea what to do. And Bill was of the mindset that JYD was almost irreplaceable, but the only way to replace him was to replace him with another black babyface. And it became a quest to find that replacement for JYD. We went through Butch Reed, went through Brickhouse Brown, George Wells, Master G. I mean, the list is endless. The Sandman or the Snowman and everybody. It was brutal. But JYD wasn't just a black superstar, man. He was just a superstar. And he was a megastar that Vince wanted bad, and he did pretty damn good for Vince in New York as well. But incredible talent that controlled the room, man, and he commanded respect wherever he went.
Well, I hope we get to talk about him some more sometime, because I feel like he's one of those names that people don't talk about enough now. Let's talk about the June 5th show at Madison Square Garden. You guys had an interesting main event here. Steve Austin is teaming with The Undertaker to take on Kane and Mankind, and they draw 19,506 fans, of which 16,814 paid over $391,000 at the gate. This is the largest gate ever in the United States for a non-pay-per-view event for the WWF. And this is just a random show, man. What can you tell us about the incredible success you're enjoying, especially in the Garden, which Vince has always held in high regard?
Well, it was a time where, as I said, for me, I remember coming in 1987, and all you had to do was put Hulk Hogan's name on a marquee and you would sell out. Everywhere that we went in 87 during that time, it was sellouts across the country. So to be back at that place again, and no matter where the hell we were going, we were doing great business. And it's always nice when you go in your backyard and you see this kind of a gate and this kind of a response, and the magic is back. You know, it's like all of a sudden you're in a slump and then you're back. And that was the feeling, to be able to do it in your hometown, in your home arena, which that's what MSG was for Vince.
And it's got to be a big deal to Vince because, 3 years prior to this, he couldn't sniff a sellout. He couldn't give away tickets in the Garden. And now, man, he's just on top, setting records. There is an interesting thing that we see here on the June 8th Raw. We saw George Martin from the New York Giants and Darnell Autry from the Chicago Bears on Raw to present Mr. McMahon with the Humanitarian of the Year award. And Austin shows up with a black tie, jeans, no shirt or jacket. And Martin claims that he's representing Minority Athletes Network and said McMahon gave less money than he promised and his check bounced twice and his favorite wrestler is Austin. How great is this?
It was nice because these guys got it and they like to have fun. They were big fans of the business and they got it. So they came out and they enjoyed fucking with Vince and being able to just amplify that Mr. McMahon character, which was still brand new and which was really hadn't taken off even the way that we had anticipated later on. So, now we're still sitting there going, is there something here? And we were having fun with it and it worked. And it was just guys coming out and getting the joke, if you will.
Well, clearly there's something here. I mean, you guys have already had him wrestle Austin on Raw, but the fun continues here. Austin's picking McMahon's pocket, that is, pronouns pal, of $1,200. Then he gives it to the charity and says McMahon is like the tightest SOB in the WWF. And then, of course, Undertaker's music plays. And then the Druids bring a casket to the ring. But it winds up being Kane coming out of the casket and Mankind coming from the other side of the ring. And then they put Austin in the casket and Kane stands on top and he's stuck there. And that's when they do the whole, making the fire shoot out of the, what'd y'all call that? I mean, I know you call it a boom technically, but whenever Kane would motion his hands down and the fire shoots up out of the ring post, was there a name in the industry for that?
Well, it's the concussion is the big boom and everything, but it was just, God damn, I don't think we called it anything. God damn it, when he moves his hands down, I want to hear ba-boom.
Well,
damn, rattle my boots.
I'm just guessing they don't call it a concussion today. Raw that night did a 4.32. Nitro did a 4.03. The following week, Raw did a 4.3 and Nitro did a 4. On June 22nd, Raw did a 4.3 and Nitro does a 4.1. At this point, you guys are racking up the wins here, back to back to back. Is there any sort of high-fiving when these ratings come in on Tuesday, or is it just business as usual?
Business as usual. Move the fuck on and let's continue to do it. Just keep doing what we're doing right.
Let's talk a little bit about the June 15th Raw. I feel like this is worth mentioning. Shawn Michaels is here for the first time since WrestleMania, and he's here because they're doing the television in San Antonio. And Meltzer would write, the report from those who saw him was that he mentally appeared to be in better shape than in a long time. He had cut his hair, and he was able to sit down and stand upright for periods of time without excruciating pain. Do you remember him showing up here? Because we really haven't seen him since WrestleMania 14 in Boston. Now, granted, that was just a couple of months back, 2.5 at this point. But still, a lot of people probably thought the way he left, we're not going to see him for a while. What'd you think?
Okay. You ever see the paint? You remember the paint, the little Dutch boy?
Yeah.
Okay. And the haircut that the little Dutch boy had?
Yep.
Okay. Well, and I distinctly remember this television because it was the first time we had seen Shawn in quite some time, and he had cut his hair. And Undertaker and I were in the backstage area when he came in, and it was like, right at the same time, looked at each other and went, oh my God, it's the little Dutch boy. Because he looked just like that kid on the side of the paint with the haircut. But it was a different Shawn Michaels than we'd had before. He was in great spirits. I remember the boots he was wearing because they were the boots with the sole that he works in now. And he wears them all the time and has them specially made. But he looked good. He looked clean. He looked healthy. And it was not the old rambunctious Shawn. This was a new Shawn with a smile on his face and saying hello to everybody in a pretty damn good mood. But the biggest thing was the haircut.
Let's talk a little bit about the deal that comes out in the June 8th Observer. Meltzer reports here that USA signed Raw for 3 more years. And we just heard a few days ago that all these years later, 20 years later, in fact, USA has signed them again for 5 years. Do you remember at this time? I mean, obviously ratings are up. Are you guys still dealing with Bonnie Hammer here? What was the relationship like after a few years prior? Maybe the ratings weren't where everybody would have liked, but now you guys are riding high. So it feels like the perfect time to get another deal, which is very Vince McMahon like.
Yeah, it was. And I think we were definitely dealing with Bonnie at this point, but Bonnie didn't have the kind of power at this point that she would later get at the USA Network. And I think we were dealing with Jeff Zucker. I think that's his name, who was handling everything for USA Network at the time. And it was a coup. It was one of those, we wanted to stay on USA Network, but they were doing the same thing then. We were shopping it to other networks and seeing who was interested in USA as the home. And that's where we wanted to be.
Let's talk about Over the Edge. This was in the Observer. The WWF paper, Listen, Over the Edge, blew out the circuits because so many people ordered it all at the last minute. So everyone who ordered that show will now be given King of the Ring for free. That's right. I said paper listen. And there's this weird deal where for a little while, you guys experimented with the idea of you can't watch the show, but you can hear it. It's almost like podcasting before podcasting was a thing. Do you even remember hearing about pay per listen? I feel like I did a little pay per listen as a kid on some of those adult channels.
Yeah, I can't say that I have ever even heard of pay per listen. This is the first time I've ever even heard that term. So that might have been something they experimented with, but I was not involved in any way, shape, or form. Never even heard about it.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the company at this time, because we've got this storyline going with blood falling out of the ceiling, and we're trying to make Kane like the top guy. And there is a bit of a mess here that I want to talk about that goes down on the June 22nd Raw, where Austin's doing a promo challenging Kane. Kane comes out and makes some motion, not like the concussion motion. and this red liquid comes from the cage, and it's supposed to look like it's raining blood on Austin. Chat me up about this liquid, and I assume this is the same thing that Gangrel was using. Whose idea was this shit?
Bro, what if we gave a giant bloodbath to Stone Cold from the ceiling? Kind of like when Carrie got the bloodbath in the movie. I forget the name, but her name was Carrie. And that was Vince's idea. He loved the shit coming down from the ceiling. Whether it was shit, whether it was blood, no matter what the hell it was, he liked shit coming from the ceiling and falling on people's heads.
It might have actually been shit, because Austin gets hospitalized right after the Houston house show due to a staph infection in his right elbow. So you've probably seen this tape, maybe very recently on the WWE Network, and you saw that he had it taped up, and you might have wondered, what's up with that? Well, allegedly, he got a fever up to like 104 degrees. He had to have IVs. I mean, he's hospitalized for a while here, and people aren't exactly sure where it's supposed to have happened, but people do think that he had like a bad elbow bruise that happened in either San Antonio or Austin. And by Wednesday, he had a mild fever, and things just progressively got worse. What can you tell us about this staph infection and how hit or miss this looked for him? Because he's your top guy. He's the main draw. He's hotter than a cap gun. And here he is.
Fucked up. And the fucked up thing about it from our vantage point was, you know, a lot of times when you think of staph, it usually comes from an open wound that gets infected and gets worse from there. And Steve didn't have a cut. He didn't have an open wound. So they think that it was internal, but it was a freak deal. Banged his friggin' elbow, and it kept getting worse. And all of a sudden you see this red line coming up his arm, which signifies staph infection. And they got him into the hospital. He wasn't feeling good. And Steve is one of those guys that unless he's dying, he's not going to the friggin' hospital. He just won't go to the hospital unless it's absolutely a necessity. So when he reached 104-degree fever and was in enough pain that made him go to the hospital, he finally went and had to put him on the shelf for a few days while he got some IV, get some fluids in him, and get some antibiotics in him to just get this thing under control. But it was a freak deal, and that's why they don't really know where it came from, other than probably this deep bruise somehow.
He missed some smaller house shows like Corpus Christi and Tyler, Texas, but he's scheduled to return in Houston and does work the main event because it's sold out of the Compact Center, and he beat Mankind, but he's in such pain that he has to go to the hospital, like you're saying, which, as if that wasn't enough, around this same time, The Undertaker suffers an ankle injury, and a lot of people believe he cracked it, and there's maybe some bone chips floating around after the June 16th tapings in Austin. So basically, you guys need to stay the hell away from Texas. Allegedly, this injury happens on location in what was supposed to be Paul Bearer's house. And he, of course, tore that up on the Raw that aired on June 22nd. But there's not really a noticeable spot where he was injured. And during the angle, Paul Bearer also suffers an ankle injury, which is probably when the Undertaker's throwing furniture around, maybe something lands on his leg. What can you tell us about just the bad timing here? Because Undertaker is also off of Corpus Christi and Tyler, but he tries to work Houston, but he's limited so badly that he and Kane just have a very short match, ending with a double count-out finish. And everybody has to be smartened up at that point that, man, something's amiss. But now you've got two guys down seemingly at the exact same time.
Well, not just two guys. You got two of your top guys. And, oh, yes, Paul trying to get the hell out of the way and got his ankle fucked up from Undertaker throwing shit. And it was just one thing after another. And it just was compounding to where you're going, what the hell is next? And it just was shitty timing on everything. Taker's ankle was fucked up, but Taker's ankle was more of like a twist, and nobody thought it was broken. Nobody thought it was really that bad. Just keep off of it, tape it up pretty good, and felt he'd be okay, ready to go.
Well, it's obvious when you watch this pay-per-view, when he drops down from the cage and then when he comes out later in the main event with a chair. I mean, he's limping like a sumbitch. It's something to see. So let's talk about, the backup plan. And I know that you're going to say, oh no, we knew they'd make it. But I mean, at least you guys have to float an idea. What if Austin's in the fucking hospital? Like, what if Austin and or Undertaker have to miss the show? Was there a plan B?
No, there wasn't, because you're sitting there going, what is your plan B at that point? What the hell do you do? We really didn't have anything other than going with the King of the Ring and making that your main match, because your top two baby faces and the other two feature matches are fucked. Could have put Mick Foley against Kane, perhaps, but at that point, you're just trying to get the match in the ring and do anything you can to at least deliver a semblance of the attraction that you advertised.
It comes out around this same time in the month of June that there were reports, especially in Japan, some in America, but a lot in Japan, that the World Wrestling Federation was interested in buying the Minnesota Vikings. And I know we've talked about this a little bit on our XFL episode, which is available in the archives at somethingtowrestle.com. But what do you remember about this alleged meeting on June 12th, where it's floated through the company that McMahon is considering buying the Vikings?
What if I bought the Vikings? And we didn't know what the hell he was talking about really at first, but it was more than anything. It was a publicity stunt, because they were floating out there that the Vikings were up for sale, and Vince floated it out there that he was interested in it. And I dare say that had the price been right, he might have even bought the damn thing for publicity purposes, to make it, to say, okay, the WWF just bought the Minnesota Vikings and Vince McMahon is now entering the football arena. So it worked. Got people talking.
I love that you suggested he might have bought it for publicity. It cost more than the WWF at the time. I mean, it would have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm sure.
Yeah, but he could have raised that money easily. He's Vince McMahon, damn it.
Oh, I'm not doubting him. It is kind of funny to think, too, that what if he would have bought the Vikings and like 6 years later, his champion walks out and then tries out for his other business?
God damn it, pal. That'd be ludicrous.
All right, let's talk about why we're here. King of the Ring 1998. It's a sellout crowd here. 17,087 fans on hand. 15,505 were paid. And it set an all-time city gate record of over 539,000, and they do like another 148 grand in merchandise. You guys are setting the woods on fire, man. We've never really talked about this before. We know that some of the guys get pay-per-view bonuses. You work in the office at the time. Are you getting any sort of bump when the business is doing so well?
Well, I had a very unique deal in that Jim Ross and I, when it came time to negotiate, people get in the office, they would get a yearly bump, and they would go in and they would have their performance review and they would get their raises and what have you. And Jim and I went in and we essentially negotiated a decrease in pay, but a participation in the house shows and everything else. So we did participate. We took less money up front, because we did have a hand in what was being presented out there in the house shows and television, so that we wanted to be paid on our contributions. And that's what we did. So I took less money, guaranteed money up front, to participate in the back end.
Let's talk a little bit about the actual show itself. We start off with an interesting match, to say the least. What can you tell us about our opener here?
Well, I'll talk in the Headbangers against the Kaientai and Dick to Go and Funaki. What?
I was just waiting on you. I mean, I really just threw that opening match to you just to hear you say that one more time.
What, Dick to Go and Men's Teo and Shoichi Funaki? The only one that's left out of the whole damn match is Funaki, left in the damn company, and he's had a hell of a run. Indeed.
Thank you for that. This is an unannounced match. They say they put it together early in the afternoon here. Meltzer would say solid, fast-paced opener, some good moves, but it didn't have time to build. Ultimately, though, the finish sees Michinoku, which is Taka, go ahead and get the pin on Funaki after the Michinoku driver. and it gets 2.25 stars. It does feel a little bit like filler, but I don't know when we'll talk about these guys again. What can you tell us about Men's Tao and Dick to Go?
Old Dick to Go. Well, actually, when I watched this match and I started thinking about it, this was our version of the WCW Cruiserweight car wreck match. And that's exactly how Bischoff would explain it to him and tell those guys to go out and give me a car crash. Didn't give a shit about psychology, didn't give a shit about selling or anything else. This was our version of that, where our guys actually sold and did tell a story in the match. But Kai and Tai, these were, it was a hell of a group that we got from the Michinoku Sasuke's group in Japan. Those guys wanted to get away from Sasuke so bad. And we also had Wally Yamaguchi, who was their manager, who was a long time higher up in Gong magazine. And Wally was a great guy, but it was a spotlight thing. There was only so much that you could do with Terry Boy and old Dick to Go, and there's only so much you could really do with them, man. And without having a big flourishing light heavyweight division, this was it. And I'd say it was a damn good, solid match and a good opener.
Let's talk a little bit about, and this is fun, I'm excited about this. Sable comes to the ring. Meltzer would write, Sable walks to the ring without tipping over. He just can't help himself. By the way, it's been a while, I'll admit, since I've seen any Sable from this era. I know we just did a Sable episode last week, but I just read, I didn't watch any footage. Sable was Roll Tide here in June of 98. I see why she was getting all these reactions.
Well, yeah, but then the Wrestling Observer editorial paper, I can't even call it a newsletter anymore because it's just an editorial bullshit paper. But good God, she looked beautiful. Yeah, it was. There you go. She was Roll Tide, man. She was hot as a firecracker.
This outfit was painted on, and this is probably a scene you're familiar with. You've got Vince McMahon coming out with the Stooges, the very early version, Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe. And as Sable turns to leave, Pat Patterson pats her on the ass, and Jim Ross has an interesting comment, and then she slaps Pat Patterson. And they show the replay multiple times, and it does feel a little bit like during McMahon's promo, he's trying to stretch for time. And I'm not saying this as someone who knows what's going on, but it does feel like if you know that Austin's hurt, and you know that Undertaker's hurt, and you know this other match wasn't even advertised, and now we've got a Vince McMahon promo in the middle of a pay-per-view, it feels like we're trying to just give the crowd something either entertaining or whatever, but we're trying to just fill for time here. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. And it was more of along the lines of Vince was looking at the pay-per-views and saying, why are the pay-per-views just a wrestling show? Why aren't we giving people more on the pay-per-views like they get on Monday Night Raw? When they tune into a pay-per-view, they want the same storylines continued from Monday Night Raw, and he felt that the pay-per-views should give more of the same shit that we give them on Raw. More backstage stuff, more in-ring promos. So that's what he was trying to do there. And yes, and also kill time. We also did it later on in the show with Paul Bearer. But some of the comments, I mean, listening to Jim Ross and talk about, my Oklahoma buddies would marry her dog just to be a part of that family right there. Talking about Sable when she came to the ring, and just going back and listening to some of Lawler. Lawler and JR's commentary on this show was priceless. It was good shit.
So, let's talk about, the King of the Ring semifinal, because up next, man, you talk about a tale of two styles here. It's Ken Shamrock and Jeff Jarrett. And Meltzer would write the crowd wasn't into the match at all. And he says they didn't miss any moves. There was nothing wrong with it. They just didn't have enough time to build a match, and they had no heat going in. He would write, Shamrock nearly killed himself when he did a running Hurricane Rana, and in turning over, appeared to hit his head on the mat, and then clamped on the ankle lock for submission. 1 star. This is weird to look, because you've got Jeff Jarrett, and I don't know why, but he still feels a little out of place here to me. And he's got the big entrance with the fireworks and the whole deal, and he's got Tennessee Lee with him. And then you've got Ken Shamrock, who looks like ass kicker extraordinaire. What'd you think of the match when you watched this back?
Good God, I thought that they had a pretty damn good match. I mean, it wasn't 18-star Fernum Snabit's reverse double explanation, Hurricane Rana, but it was a damn good match. It was solid and it did what it meant to do, and that was get Ken Shamrock over like a damn monster.
If you haven't heard already, it's Smooth Sack Summer, Daddy. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're escaped from pubes to bum. That's right. This is the summer to keep your balls cool while looking hot with Manscaped. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming are making sure we have a ball this summer by giving our pants partners everything they need to stay fresh. Dive headfirst into the Smooth Sack Summer by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with our promo code STW. The Manscaped Performance Package 4.0 has everything you need to prepare for that summer bod. They have built the ultimate grooming bundle for your summer grooming. It all starts with the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer that features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multi-function on-off switch that can engage a travel lock, and it gives you the ability to turn the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave. Did I mention this trimmer is waterproof too? Beach, lake, or shower, this razor will devour even the strongest pubes. Now that we have the perfect haircut, use Manscaped's liquid formulations to keep that freshness even at the hottest summer barbecues. Most importantly, use the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant to stay cool in the heat. With a soothing aloe vera formula, it's the best in business for the below-the-waist freshness, and this clear drying formula will keep you looking good while smelling good. Manscaped even threw in 2 free gifts with their Performance Package 4.0, the Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. Wearing sandals with some nasty-looking toenails during the summer months? Well, take a look at the Shears 2.0, a luxury nail grooming kit. This kit includes stainless steel cutters, tweezers, and grooming scissors. With the Performance Package, your balls will be ready to impress, but make sure you cover the rest with Shears 2.0. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code STW at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code STW at manscaped.com. It's Smooth Sack Summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind.
No, he was that for sure. I guess we should mention that on his way in, he beat Kama and Mark Henry to get here. And Jeff had to beat Farouk and Mark Mero. Shamrock on this bad landing here on the Frankensteiner. Probably been a while since you saw that. I mean, he had to have something going on after that, right? Talk about getting your bell rung.
Yeah, I don't think that but that's the funny thing about Ken is you can never tell if he got his bell rung or not because he would never sell it. And he always kind of had that crazy look in his eye anyway. It looked absolutely brutal and you would have thought, but he came back. No, I'm fine. No, everything's good. What's next? Just kind of bobbing his head, ready to go eat somebody.
In the other semifinal, we got Rocky Maivia pinning Dan Severn in 4 minutes and 25 seconds. Meltzer would write, awful. Also, no heat. He was not a fan, and he says Severn's inexperience at selling was killing the match. And he says Maivia's knee was giving him a lot of trouble and made his stomps look weak. In the end, he gave it a negative half star. Maivia, of course, gets the win here. What'd you think? I mean, Meltzer takes a hard stand here, and he says, this may have been the first pinfall loss Severn has ever taken as a pro wrestler. While there was no other way out of this, the finish does kill Severn as an international pro wrestling attraction because all he had to offer was that nobody had ever beaten him. But of course, he had to lose here. What'd you think?
I thought it was the drizzling shits. It was absolutely fucking terrible. It was clash of styles, clash of personalities, and as much as I like Dan Severn personally, it just the WWE wasn't the place to highlight Dan Severn's talents. Dan, legit badass, great in the UFC and all that, but Dan couldn't make that crossover into the mainstream. There was a spot there where he grabbed Rock's knee and falls on Rock's knee, and you even see Rock, camera was right in his face, where he no-sold it, but he sold it with a God damn it. And you could tell he was pissed and hurting. And there's not much you can do with Dan Severn if he doesn't want to do it. So that you add that to the issue, and the match absolutely sucked. Actually, I have to improve just to suck.
Let me ask you, was there ever any consideration to doing a Shamrock Severn main event at King of the Ring. You know, those guys had been 1-1 in the UFC. It feels like somebody somewhere would have said, hey, what if? And obviously the inexperience on both sides would have probably talked you out of that. But yet you still wound up doing it with Shamrock and Maivia. Tell me about this.
Well, absolutely. We thought, what if, when we had Severn and Shamrock together. However, neither one of them wanted to do it. And the reason they didn't want to do it is they felt that there was still money on the table in the MMA world to have that match again. So they didn't want to have a worked match. There was, what the hell do you do with it? Who do you put over? I mean, what do you do with it? There's nothing to do. I don't think that they liked each other personally. They got along professionally, but okay, great. They're 1-1 in a real world. Now you get to a worked world. Who do you put over? And then to get the other guy to actually want to do it when they both felt there was money on the table in the MMA world. That's why it never happened.
On the way here, Rock had to beat Vader and Triple H, which pretty interesting. Severn got here by beating D'Lo and Owen Hart. What do you think of Dave's comment in the Observer here that this essentially kills off Severn's attraction because he's finally lost? And obviously in wrestling, everybody has to lose eventually, but what do you think of Meltzer's assertion here?
Well, what the hell I asked the same question. What the hell do you do with him? Does he never lose? Is that his attraction? Okay, Dan Severn's attraction is he's undefeated and he's never ever defeated. Otherwise, he loses his being a pro wrestling attraction. Man, that's a tough gimmick to have unless you're a Kurt Angle or somebody. And even Kurt Angle could lose. So in pro wrestling, everybody's got to lose eventually. And this was Dan's time. It was the right thing to do. And I don't know that Dan was that big of a pro wrestling attraction internationally or domestically that it was really going to hurt him with the places that he would have been an attraction, I guess is what I'm saying.
Around this time, Dan did an interview on the internet, and when he asked about the rivalry with Shamrock, he says, quote, let's just say he didn't get his body by just working out. But then again, most of the bigger guys in wrestling did not. Which I feel like is probably going to get him some heat with the company. I mean, when you guys hear that he says something like that, you're not that far removed from the steroid issue. I mean, you're less than 5 years out. Is there any recourse on a Severn, or was he never really an office favorite anyway?
No, it was a what the fuck are you doing? What are you talking about here? And you've got to be media savvy. You can. If you don't like the guy, okay, then learn how to work and learn how to put somebody over with a backhanded compliment, but don't do that. And that was taken as Shamrock was pissed off about it. JR was not happy about it. Wasn't a smart thing to say. And especially in the context of everything, it just wasn't a smart and or nice thing to say and or do.
Next up, we've got a fairly interesting match here. Only in the WWF would this happen. Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor are going to take on Al Snow and Head.
Yeah, that's right. You said that right.
Yeah.
Mannequin Head.
Christopher Taylor. That's right. That's my name for him. Christopher Taylor beat Snowhead. And the stipulation is Snow has to leave the WWF. Meltzer would write, naturally after Sable lost, the loser leaves and came back without even so much as an attempt at a logical explanation. And after Vader lost his mask, only to still be wearing it the next day, any WWF stipulation doesn't mean a thing, and I doubt one fan actually cares if Snow isn't leaving. What do you think of this match and the stipulation that if he loses, he's gone forever?
Fucking hate it. It's fine if he's gone forever. But I hated this time of nobody cares about the stipulations. Well, if nobody cares about the stipulations, then don't make the fucking stipulation. If it means nothing, then why do you make it? Oh, well, it means something for the attraction. No, it doesn't. If you don't fucking carry it out, it means nothing, and it kills all the other stipulations on down the line. So I hated it.
Jerry Lawler was the special guest referee here, and he's really playing the heel referee. And eventually, Snow low blows Taylor and throws the head down and covers Taylor, and Lawler won't count. So then Brian Christopher gets a bottle of Head and Shoulders shampoo and put head on the bottle and then covered both with Lawler counting 3, since the shampoo bottle represented the head's shoulders.
Yeah, head and shoulders.
Meltzer would write, sometimes the comedy works and sometimes it doesn't, and this time it didn't even come close. Even Jim Ross basically admitted it was a travesty on television, which may also be a first. -2 stars. Head and Shoulders.
Bro, they're gonna love it because they're gonna pop when they say, how can you pin the head? The head got no shoulders. So we put the shoulders on the head. The head and the shoulders. They're gonna love it.
Now let's run through this. There are other podcasts that have a meltdown in 2018 when someone wrestles a blow-up doll. And I agree. Maybe that's not very old school. But good Lord, 20 years ago, we've got mannequin heads and shampoo bottles, bro.
Yeah. Fucking horrible. Embarrassing. It was embarrassing. It really and truly was. And for those old school guys, me, Jerry Briscoe, it just, you sit there and scratch your head and go, what the fuck? Because it's, those are the things that people would point at and make fun of, and rightfully so. How do you defend that?
Well, and what's weird too is, as crazy as it sounds, Al Snow got this head gimmick over in ECW. I mean, he even main evented an ECW pay-per-view, WrestlePalooza, back in May for the ECW world title against Shane Douglas. And now that he got it over, you guys call him back up here, or so it seems. He starts showing up on Raw, and he's coming over to the commentators table asking Lawler to get him a meeting with Vince, and that eventually leads to this match. And then here he is with this silly shit. This is probably not what he envisioned when he came up after being over with the head in ECW, presented differently. Is that fair to say?
I thought that the stuff that they were doing with Al leading up to this was some pretty damn entertaining shit, with Al getting in the costumes and trying to sneak in the building and having the conversations with Head and being crazy and what have you. To me, this just took all of that and flushed it down the toilet. Cause then that meant nothing. And it was just fucking terrible. Terrible is the kindest thing that I can say about it. It was just not good. And when you watch this match, it is a perfect example of seeing all of the air just sucked out of an arena and killing a crowd, as Jim Cornette would say, "Dinner Kelsey's nuts, motherfucker. They were flatter than a plate full of piss." Terrible.
All right, let's talk about something that wasn't terrible. X-Pac is wrestling Owen Hart. Finally, a good match here. They go 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Meltzer would say the match had no heat, but the wrestling was good. X-Pac worked as the face, but the crowd didn't take to him at all, nor to Hart. So they were just indifferent, even though both guys worked hard. The only pop, and it was small, was X-Pac doing the Bronco ride spot. What did you think of this match? X-Pac gets the win here, and there is a moment when there's all sorts of interference here with Chyna and Mark Henry that Owen puts X-Pac in the sharpshooter. The ref's not paying attention. X-Pac's tapping out, and then Vader comes out, does his body block on Henry, which causes Vader to take a tumble himself. And while all this is going on, Chyna gets in the ring, gives Owen a DDT. The ref turns around and counts X-Pac for the pin. So even though you've got two world-class performers here in X-Pac and Owen Hart, they got to have all this shit going on. You got Chyna, you got Vader, you got Mark Henry, 2.25 stars. Why didn't this match get over with the crowd? Is it just the way these characters had been presented? But, and why was it necessary to have all the extra shenanigans here?
Well, I disagree that it didn't get over with the crowd, because I thought that the crowd was going to be happy to see anything after the debacle they had just seen with Head and Too Cool. So the match itself was solid, man. It was a good, snug match. They told a good little story. But watching it, I can see, I think, you know how X-Pac has torn his butthole a few times?
Well, okay, that's quite the transition.
Well, I was going to say that when you watch this match and he takes the bump off the top rope and straddles that top rope, that may have been the first tearing, because that looked like it would have torn a butthole, if you ask me, just going back and watching that match 20 years later. So that might have started the tear.
I got to say, Bruce, I don't know where to transition from X-Pac's butthole tear here, so let's try to move along here. I do feel like we should mention that during the 94 King of the Ring, 4 years prior to this, Owen defeated the then 1-2-3 Kid on his way to winning the tournament. And this is sort of fun because we get a rematch 4 years later that really, if you're not paying attention, you would have slept on. But these guys had a cool little feud again here, even building this up on Raw. There was a match where Owen's wrestling and X-Pac comes down and hits Owen in the back of the head very hard with a chair. And it looks like he busts his head open on the backside. And their brief feud ends after this. Was there some heat over the chair shot? What can you tell us about the chair shot that busted Owen's head open?
Well, Owen was pissed off, but, you know, it's accidents, man. It's wrestling and shit's going to happen. So you just chalk it up and you know that a receipt's coming. It was so bad that they actually replayed it, which is funny sometimes when a real bad accident happens like that and you replay it and say, okay, he got 7 staples or whatever Owen got in the back of his head. You look at those chair shots that get 7 staples, it probably hurt like hell. And then you look at some of the other just devastating chair shots and they don't match up, because it's like people are going, well, that one didn't look that bad, because from the angle it was, it's like, wasn't that bad. But yeah, he caught him on the corner of the chair and Owen was a little pissed off. But man, they worked through it and it was good for business, as the old timers would say. That's good for business, kid.
Why was the feud dropped here? I mean, Owen's in the Nation. You know, you guys are doing the spoofs, but it doesn't feel like they continue this momentum very much here. And X-Pac's pretty hot. I mean, this is his first pay-per-view back, after coming back to the company the night after WrestleMania 14. He didn't wrestle too often before this. I assume he was still hurt, and this was one of his first matches back.
Right. And frankly, there wasn't a whole lot of thought to continuing a lot of the issues and storylines. It was a week by week, the way that they were writing TV and just going on, that they're, okay, we'll have this match and then we'll move on from it. And we'll have this match next week and we'll start a new story here. So there wasn't that thought into where are you going to go in 3 weeks? Where are you going to go in 6 weeks? And what story is this going to tell? It was just, let's have matches and let's tell a quick story, and that's the end. Move on.
Well, it's not the end, because next up we've got the New Age Outlaws taking on the Midnight Express. These guys are going to go almost 10 minutes here. And Meltzer says, Midnights were still acknowledged as NWA Tag Team Champions, even though the NWA gimmick is gone, and they are basically the lowest level jobber team on the roster. He gives it a 1.5 stars. Of course, you know what's coming. Jim Cornette hits Billy with one of the NWA tag belts. Of course, Billy kicks out, and Cornette does a run in to the second spot. And this time Billy gets up, and Chyna, as Cornette stalls, comes from behind and gives Cornette a low blow. So then both of the Outlaws give Bob Holly a double hot shot, and Billy pins him. 1.5 stars. What'd you think of the match here? And how fucking awful is the Midnight Express in 1998?
It was fucking awful. No chemistry whatsoever. And the crazy thing about that is Billy and Bart were tag team partners for a long time. They had chemistry as a tag team against each other, drizzling shit. The guys just sometimes, man, you just can't go. And this was one of those examples of 4 great workers that couldn't get it together, man. And it was like fucking watching oil and water. It was painful to watch because you know that all four of them are better. And they kept talking about how, you know, Bodacious Bart and Bombastic Bob, former tag team champions, and this, that, and the other thing, and Road Dogg and Billy. It just sucked. It just sucked. And even here's how you start off the match. You start off the match with Jim Ross talking about NWA tag team champion, but they're wrestling for the important championship tonight, the WWF tag team champions. So now all of a sudden you've already discounted your tag team in the new Midnight Express. They don't mean shit. And it was fucking horrible. No chemistry whatsoever in the drizzling shits. And
talk about Ken Shamrock beating Rocky Maivia 14 minutes and 9 seconds. Shamrock becomes your King of the Ring tournament winner. And of course, Hunter Hearst Helmsley is there doing ringside commentary. What'd you think of his commentary? What'd you think of the match? And this is really a trilogy because these guys had 3 matches in 98 on pay-per-view. The Rumble, WrestleMania, and now this one. Of the 3 matches, which one did you prefer?
God, I can't pick one, but these guys, Rock and Shamrock, they enjoyed working with each other. And as little chemistry as the tag match had before, you had chemistry with Rock and Shamrock. But for me, you know, you asked about Hunter's commentary. I thought it was drizzling shits. I hated Hunter on commentary because it was all that smart ass shit and it sounded like a 16-year-old teenager with all of his one-liners and cute little things that they had to get in. And it took away from the match and it just took away from it. And they're trying to do stuff with Rock and Hunter and I get all that shit. But there's a way to get your talent over and get the guys in the ring over, get yourself over without burying people with the smart ass shit all the time. And to me, it was just way too much.
I can't believe you said something negative.
I always say negative shit.
Wow. I'm proud of you. See if I can get you to do that on the network sometime.
Ask me the question on the network.
Oh my God. It's up to me to do everything. I forget.
Goddamn right.
So the match gets 3.25 stars. I dug the match. There was something about Shamrock and Rock that just clicked for me. How did these guys enjoy working with each other?
They loved working with each other, and that's why it showed. That's why you enjoyed it. And you enjoyed it because you get lost in it, and it felt real. And when they got out there, everything that Shamrock did, and the one thing I always loved about guys like Ken Shamrock and Kurt Angle was, yes, they had their finish, the same thing they went to, but they always went into it in a unique and different way. So you always saw something new from him, and that's what you got here. And it was a great coming out party for Ken Shamrock to try and do something with him and get him over.
I do want to point out here that Shamrock becomes King of the Ring, and it looks like he's going to be poised for big things because in this era, that was certainly, you know, what was next. I mean, you saw Hunter level up, you saw Austin level up, you saw Owen and Brett. I mean, everybody who's won King of the Ring goes on to do big things for the most part. And he eventually wins the Intercontinental title, but then he joins the corporation, and it feels like he never really gets to a regular main event spot. In hindsight, and I've asked you this before, but we've watched more stuff recently. You changed your opinion on Shamrock? Do you think that Shamrock was a missed opportunity to be in the main events?
I think that what happened with Ken Shamrock is timing, that if he had been at any other time with not so many top guys, yeah, look at the level of top talent we had. There's only so many people that can be in that top spot. And had Kenny come in a little bit prior to or a little bit after, it might have been different. But in that time frame that Ken came in, that was as far as he was going to rise.
So let's talk about why we're here. It feels like we have been building to this moment as we're over an hour into the show. The match that changed everything. The Undertaker gets a win over Mankind. It officially goes about 16 minutes in this Hell in a Cell match. I don't know. I mean, there's no way for us to really just talk about the match without talking about everything that led up to it and the memories of the match. And I feel like now's one of those times where I'm just going to I'm going to lay out and I'm going to let you talk about this. from everything that was happening sort of behind the scenes that week. And then I'll chime in because this is one of those stories that people have been asking about for a long time. I mean, Mick Foley has made this part of his tour all year, the 20 Years of Hell tour. He's been doing comedy clubs across the nation, and I think he's even going to take it to Australia later. And it's all about this match, really. It's maybe the most famous match in company history, certainly in this era. I mean, you could say Andre Hogan was bigger, but that was a little before my time. Here, this is as big as it was. I mean, people are still making references to it in a way they don't talk about any other match. So let's start from the beginning. When did you first hear that they were going to do Hell in a Cell, and sort of take us through all of this?
Well, leading up to it, there was a lot of talk about doing, at the time, it was Mankind and Stone Cold for the championship. And this would have been, had we gone with that match, it would have been, I believe, the third time that Steve and Mick Foley would have worked. And I just don't think that.
In a row on pay-per-view.
Yeah. And there wasn't, I don't want to say there wasn't any confidence in it, but Vince McMahon didn't feel that attraction for a third time was what we needed. And he wanted to do something different. He wanted to shake it up, and he wanted to do unpredictable in something nobody would ever call, which is what they did with Kane. So leading up to that, then you get to the point of, okay, then what the hell do you do with Mick? We've been building Mick with Steve, and then now Undertaker really doesn't have a dancing partner. So I think it was Vince McMahon who was like, why not do, Mankind and Taker one more time, put him in the cage and put him in the confines of this monstrous cage and have that epic fucking match.
Well, it's also mentioned, Foley wrote about this, of course, in his book, that Russo breaks the news to him, quote, "Cactus, we're just concerned the audience won't buy another match with you and Steve." And originally this was supposed to be the blow off with Mankind Austin in the cage. So Mankind sort of assumes, okay, well, I'm out of the cell, and he gets good news from Russo. Oh no, you're still in the cell. They're just going to do it with the Undertaker. But in Mankind's mind, Mick Foley's mind at the time, he's got to be not overjoyed with that either, because he went from working with the tippy top guy who's got a staph infection to now the not as hot guy, but still a major guy, but a guy you've had 6 pay-per-view matches with. And oh, by the way, he can't walk. He's got a jacked up ankle.
Right. And I think that Mick kind of felt, what the hell do I do now? And both guys, Taker felt the same way. Taker kind of felt like, what else do we have to do that we haven't already done? And you put him in the cell, and now that raises expectations as, there had been this Shawn Michaels and Undertaker great cell match that everybody is raving about. How do you top that? And that was Mick Foley's mindset, is how in the fuck do I top what Undertaker did with Shawn Michaels? So as legend has it, I believe, and I'd always thought it was a lot of Mick Foley, but it was Mick Foley and Terry Funk going back and just talking about, what the hell can we do? What can I do to make this match different? How do we take this to the next level? And the funny thing was Mick, after watching the match, was kind of like, there's nothing we can do. What the fuck? How do you top this match? And as legend has it, was Terry Funk that said to him, start the match on top of the cage. Which
you would think when you hear that, where the fuck do we go from there? If we're starting on top, where do we go from there? Now, if you haven't watched the first Hell in a Cell, you really should go watch that, because Undertaker Shawn Michaels really set a new precedent. I know you hate it, but Meltzer gave it 5 stars, and that match is tremendous. We've covered it in our archive, somethingtowrestle.com. And even Mankind would write in his book that when he watched this match with Terry, that Terry said, "Cactus, that's going to be difficult to beat." And so he suggests starting at the top, and I think everybody naturally thinks, well, where do you go from there?
Goddamn kid, just get on the top of the fucking cage. Start it up there. Make that big bastard chase you. Well, not only where the hell do you go from there, my first question when I'm hearing it is, how the fuck do you even get there at the beginning? You got to get there at some point. And when I heard what they had laid out, it's kind of like, okay, then what? You throw him off the cage. He takes this great bump. That should be the end. That's the finish. Where the fuck do you go from there? And when Mick says, we're going to climb back up and go back up to the top. But you just got thrown off through a fucking table. Then what? We're going to go through the cage. Wait a minute. You're starting on top of the cage. You're getting thrown off. Then you're going to climb back on top of the cage. You're going to completely kill the bump that you just fucking took.
Yep.
And then you're going to go through the fucking cage.
Yep.
To the ring.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't fucking get it. But as they laid it out and you start talking about it, the way when you tell somebody, like I just told you, it's like, okay, start on top. Man, we're going to have a fight on top of the cage. I've got a fucking chair. King Cancun. Boom. Big bump off the fucking top. Boom. Go carry him out. You come down off the cage. They think I'm done. I come back, jump up on the fucking top of the cage. We go again. This time, you choke slam me through the fucking cage. It doesn't make sense. However, when you watch how they did it and the time, when Mick Foley took the initial bump, the first bump off the top of the fucking cell, he didn't move. He just laid there like a sack of shit and did not fucking move. Jim Ross's call on that was, oh my God, he's broken in half. Good God, he's broken in half. You believed it. And the way they shot it and got off of it, because it gave you the impression that, oh my God, he's not moving. He could very well be dead. And that was a scary thing. And Mick took it so damn well that no one really knew, other than Terry when he got down there and made sure he was okay. But Mick separated his fucking shoulder on the bump. And he thought that was, well, that's okay. I just separated my shoulder. Then they go through and everybody talks about all that, the bump. Everybody thinks that bump, from the top of the cage through the table, what a horrific bump is. The bump, the scary bump, the bad bump was the bump he took off the top of the cage onto that fucking concrete ring that we used to have. And that wasn't supposed to happen that way either. The original idea behind the bump in the ring was when they got back up to the top of the cage, that they fought on top of the cage until Taker picks Mick up and goes to slam him through the cage. And when he choke slams him, a little bit of the cage gives, and you see it give. And Taker looks down, and Mick's there, and he picks Mick back up, takes him back up again, and choke slams him a second time. And more of the cage gives. And the people are watching, and they're seeing the cage start to sink from the top, and Foley's body weight is starting to come down and shit. And Taker reaches over and fucking on that third time, hopefully, and now he crashes through. But it wouldn't have been the bump from the top of the cage. It would have been probably about the equivalent of maybe right about the top rope of the cage by the time for the third time. And the thought was that cage would have broken his fall. Well, everybody saw what happened. First time, the cage was gimmicked, and it didn't break away like they thought it would. It just went. And add on top of that, there's the chair being up on the cage panel that Mick took the bump through and just followed Mick right down and smashed right into his face, knocked his teeth out. It was brutal. And anybody that's taken a bump in those old WWF rings, they were the stiffest things. I'd rather take a bump on the concrete than those old rings. So it was a little snug.
Man.
And Taker's standing up there thinking, oh shit. He ain't moving again. So here comes Terry Funk. Here comes the doctors. Here comes the referee, and everybody's trying to talk to Mick. And Mick is out of it, completely out of it, but he's going on just pure adrenaline at this point, telling everybody, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. And once Taker up on top kind of gets a sign that it's like, okay, he's okay, and Taker jumps down, and you see him, he's favoring that ankle pretty good when he jumps down from the top of the cage. But to give Mick even more time to get his bearings, Terry Funk fed in and got chokeslam right out of his shoes. Which, again, thank God for Terry Funk being down there. But a lot of that shit, like Vince coming down to check on Mick, that wasn't part of it. Vince was genuinely concerned. Like, is he okay? I have to know. And wanted to be there. It was some scary shit because we really didn't know. Is he's moving? And I'm talking to people and saying, is Mick okay? And they're going, yeah, he says he's fine. You can't be fine after that. I don't give a fuck who you are or what you are. But, man, they continued on with the match and went another little while, including Thumbtacks, which the line of the night for me after the match was Mick Foley coming up to me and apologizing to me for forgetting the Thumbtack spot.
Oh.
Said, I'm so sorry, Bruce. I totally forgot the Thumbtacks. I'm so sorry. But other than that, was it okay? Now he's got Thumbtacks stuck all over him. I said, Mick, you got the Thumbtacks in. He says, I did? Like, you got the Thumbtacks in, man. He goes, oh, okay, good. Now, the fucked up part, for me throughout this whole thing, when all this shit's happening and the choke slam through the cage, I knew the two big bumps and I knew the finish, but I didn't know what they were going to do immediately after the bump into the ring. And I'm screaming in the backstage for Pat Patterson. I'm going fucking nuts. And I'm angry at this point because Pat's the agent for the match and he's not there at Gorilla to talk me through the thing. And Jerry Briscoe comes up to me and sits me down and says, what do you want? I said, I've got to know what the hell, what we're doing here. What was planned here? What can we cut out? What can we do? What's going on? Where the fuck is Pat? And Jerry just looks at me and says, he got a call about Louie. And Louie was Pat's partner for many, many, many years, 35 plus years. And shut me down. I looked at him and said, oh my God. I says, Louie okay? And Jerry just looks at him and says, he's dead.
Oh, man.
And here's Jerry. Here I am, Pat Patterson, best friend in the business. Jerry Briscoe, another best friend in the business. And the two of us, we've got a job to do in front of us. I'm screaming like an asshole and a lunatic for Pat, not knowing what had happened. I think Jerry knew. I don't even know if Vince knew at that point. And just that, that calm comes over you. And it's a surreal feeling because all this other shit that you think is so important becomes really unimportant. And your priorities go just, it was fucked up. So like in all of that, Pat's getting a phone call that Louie has passed. I'm yelling for Pat. Where the fuck are you? To talk me through this wrestling match. And Briscoe gives me the news as cool and as calmly as somebody can do that. and just looked at me and was like, let's just get through this. Because to everybody else, that didn't matter. And we just got through it. And then you're looking at guys in the ring that are putting their bodies on the line and risking their life, literally taking bumps and doing this crazy shit that you wonder, wow, is it all worth all that? And I wonder sometimes, man. It just, I said to Mick then, I've said to Mick today, you know, I just hated the punishment he put his body through. I really and truly did. His body, his head, everything. And it was just a crazy night, man. It was a fucked up night.
I don't know where to go from here, man. You just dropped a lot on us. That's a lot to process here.
You know, it put shit in perspective, I guess, because, like I said, it's for the moment. You're worried about a wrestling show, and in the midst of this wrestling show, you see a couple of your friends out there risking their life and doing this incredible stunt work, I guess you could call it. But stuntmen wouldn't be as crazy to do some of the things that Mick Foley did. In the middle of that, real life is happening backstage. And you just gotta put your smile on and move on and keep going and not let anybody know. This is another night, the Rock, because Rock and Pat were very close, and thank God he was there to be with Pat and shit. And I think Linda McMahon was there, but it was, man, it was a lot of shit. That's the untold portion of the Hell in a Cell in Pittsburgh that night, of everything else going on, and Pat losing Louis, was just a crazy night. And then, they went on, and I remember Vince just sitting there thinking, God damn, tell them to go home. What else are they going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I know Mick had a thumbtack spot in here, but I think they're going to skip that. And then he goes and gets the fucking thumbtacks. So it was a night to remember. It's a night I will never, ever, ever forget, just on so many levels. Craziness, man.
How'd you know about the thumbtack spot?
I knew that the thumbtacks were under there. Mick had told me about that spot beforehand.
I mean, this is the first time they've been used in the WWE, right?
Yes, and they were sterile. And Richie Posner.
How does it work? I mean, does he get it approved through somebody? Does he tell you on Monday, hey, I need a bag of thumbtacks, and then you guys are thinking of safety and you have somebody sterilize them, or what's the process?
Yeah, Richie Posner got a bunch of thumbtacks and got them sterilized just to make it as safe as taking a bump on thumbtacks can be. And got a huge bag of them, and Mick decided how many he wanted to use and put them underneath the ring. So we knew that probably a few days beforehand.
Is there any hesitation? I mean, it's a major moment in the company to use a weapon like this. You guys have never used anything like thumbtacks before, and you would probably have argued if you heard that, guys were doing it, in combat zone wrestling or something like that. Oh, that's silly horseshit. But yeah, here it's okay. Well, why the change? Well,
I think that it was pitched to Vince. Vince, come on, you're putting us out there to do this Hell in a Cell match. We've worked 6 times. We got to do something different. I promise it won't be too much. And Mick could be pretty convincing in his arguments and selling shit to Vince. And he was able to sell it. I didn't like it. I don't know that Vince McMahon really liked it, but he approved it and he let him do it.
Did he approve it because he had taken the Austin match away from him and he felt like he needed to give him something?
I think that he felt for the match and for everything that he was feeling their pain of, hey, yeah, this is the 7th time we're working with each other in a big match. It's got to be different. We need to have something different, as if the 2 big bumps weren't enough.
When did Vince McMahon know about throwing motherfuckers off cages?
Probably early in that week. But again, the one bump going off the cage onto the announce table, I guess, was as safe as you can make something like that. And the second bump was meant to be something else. And that was something that just went wrong.
It was supposed to be work at it. And then it finally gives and he is hanging on as it falls, not just breaking through. Right.
Because nobody would have wanted, no one in their right mind would ever take that bump from the top of the cage like that.
Well, it is something that people still talk about because a lot of people debated, well, you can see the zip ties. Clearly it was supposed to break, but you're saying not like that. It was supposed to break, but in time, not on the very first contact with it.
Correct. It was supposed to gradually give until about the third choke slam to where he would finally go through, but the cage would be breaking his fall along the way.
You know what's weird is when I watched this match back this week, it's the first time I watched it in a long time, and I guess I'm just getting older now, and it sort of clicked in my brain, what if he missed that table? It's not like earlier in the day. I know sometimes before a big pay-per-view, if somebody's like, oh, I want you to do a reverse power bomb or something, they do a walkthrough. There's no walking through throwing yourself off the fucking cage. You're just doing it. And it's not, I know that he had a lot of experience jumping off the ring apron to the concrete floor. I get it. But the distance you're going, the height you're up, and it's not like you got a spot on the concrete you're really trying to hit. If you get a little bit of a guy or you get all of a guy, it doesn't matter. This is different. This is much higher and something he's never done before. What if he missed? What if he hit the people? The Spanish announce team? What if he hit the guardrail? What if he hit the concrete? Mick Foley could very easily be dead from that spot, or certainly paralyzed.
Well, and Mick was in complete control of the bump the whole way. So at that point, you have to look at him and have the confidence in him to either do it or not. And he's the one that's taking the risk, and he's the one that has looked at it and feels that he can pull this off. We had the table.
A lot of confidence, and I get when you're saying he's in control. I understand that Undertaker's not throwing him off, but I am saying you're leaving it up to a guy's judgment to hope that he's right on something he's never done before. And if he's wrong, you've just had a death on pay-per-view, a horrific accident on pay-per-view.
You can say that about any bump, and you can say that about anything. And unfortunately, there have been horrific accidents that have happened on much simpler bumps. So that's every day those guys take that risk.
Let me ask you.
And it was a risk, and I think everybody knew it was a risk.
This is a weird question I ask. If the Owen accident had happened before this, there's no chance this bump happens, right?
I don't think so. No.
It's just weird to think about how so much of everything changes after those two things. This bump, and which is obviously scripted, and then a very real tragedy. But really, a couple of things go differently here, and this could have been totally different. In his book, Foley wrote about this, that Cactus was sort of pitched this idea jokingly by Funk. Maybe you should start on top and just let him throw you off. And he says it jokingly. And Foley sort of jokes back, oh, and then I can climb back up and he can throw me off again. And eventually he decides, wait, I think I can really do this. And he spends the next week or two trying to pitch the Undertaker on let's starting up top. And Undertaker shoots it down every time. And then eventually he says to Cactus, "Why are you so intent on killing yourself up there?" And Foley wrote that he answered, "Because I'm afraid the match is going to stink. You can't walk, and let's face it, I don't have any heat. We've got a heck of a legacy to live up to, and I don't want this match to ruin it. If we start out hot enough, we can make the people think we had one hell of a match, even if we didn't." Eventually, the Undertaker comes around to the idea. Did you have a conversation with Undertaker about climbing to the top of the cage with this hurt foot and then throwing a motherfucker off? Because even though we understand wrestling and Foley's really he's gonna do it himself, the perception would certainly be different if this went poorly, and it would affect the Undertaker. And this is somebody he cares about, who he's done a lot of business with, who's doing this. Did you have a conversation before or after the match with Undertaker?
Well, I had a lot of conversations with both Mick and Undertaker before the match, and frankly after the match, just thinking, think about what they were trying to top. They were trying to top Shawn Michaels from the middle of the Hell in a Cell, standing on a crossbeam, taking that bump into the announcer's table, which was absolutely spectacular at the time. And Mick feeling he had to top that so that people wouldn't think the match sucked. And that's the part that always would get me. It's like, then what? Okay, then how do we top that? And we found ourselves in that position, to where when Mick and Hunter were on top of the cage and Mick took the bump again through the top of the cage, but we had the ring gimmick so that he went through it and it was completely safe. And we did practice that, and we did make sure that went as planned beforehand. But it's crazy, man. It was a different business, and guys, a lot of times they look at that and like you look at Mick Foley's legacy, and that's in so many ways, that's his legacy, that bump, that night. Fact that he kept going and he was out of it. And the fact that, when he comes back, he convinces all of us, no, got my bell rung, but I'm okay. I can go out, my shoulder's out, but the doctor popped it back in. I'm fine. It's an easy spot that I got to go out and do with Steve. I've got it. I'm fine. That wouldn't happen today either.
No, we haven't even gotten to that part. It's just crazy to think about that he came back out.
So Bruce is on vacation, and I can only hope that means he's putting some miles on that Peter meat, thanks to Blue Chew. Let's talk about sex, boys and girls. Remember the days when you were always ready to go? Well, now you can be again, thanks to Blue Chew. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Take these dudes anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. Roll Tide. And then the process is simple, y'all. You sign up at BlueChew.com, you consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. And boy, do we have a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code WRESTLE at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is WRESTLE, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. And Bruce's Ding Dong.
He does sort of freestyle in the book that, quote, I had missed the monitors, which was my biggest concern. Can you imagine if he'd have hit the fucking monitor? It never even crossed my mind until I read that in the book again this week.
Well, the way that the monitors were in there for that, and if the top had been off, that would have been an issue. But that part of it was actually safe because of the way they were positioned. There was no monitor in the middle, and they were on the outside, and they were gimmicked to go. And then later on, guys would get rid of them, which I always thought was silly. Why would you if you're going to put a guy through a table, why are you throwing the monitors out of the way for a smooth, nice, even, flat finish or flat bump? If you want to hurt somebody, leave the monitors there. But actually that part of it was really, to me, the least of the worries. To me, the worry was he hits that table and slid. And just slid right off the damn thing. And as you say, either went into the barricade, went into the people. There were just a lot of things, a lot of what ifs that you knock on wood and you thank God didn't happen. And then the shit that was supposed to happen that did, the other bump is like, fuck me. That's crazy.
Foley's critical of the way he took that choke slam, the one that put him through the cage, because he says it's the only time he didn't go high for an Undertaker choke slam. Understandably, he's hurting here. I mean,
thank God.
He had to climb the cage, as you said, with a separated shoulder, which is probably not easy at 300 pounds. And so when he's finally up there, he just can't get up for him. So he winds up just falling into the cage. But he says that if he had went high, he's worried that he would have over-rotated and landed on his head. It's just unbelievable. It's to the point that Foley even wrote in his book, he asked The Undertaker, hey, what'd you think when you looked down from the top of the cage and saw me on the mat? And he says, Undertaker didn't skip a beat and said, I thought you were dead.
That's just scared shitless.
And what's weird too is, when the Undertaker finally gets down there, he says, Jack, let's go home. And Foley wrote that he said, no, I'm okay. Which is just amazing.
Right.
He's so out of it. He's even asking the referee, was I already on the stretcher once tonight? Yes. Obviously we don't know back then what we know now about head injuries. This would never happen, but it's just unbelievable. And you even referenced the whole, sorry, I forgot the thumbtacks thing. When he comes to the back, is there like a standing ovation? What's the reaction when he comes through the curtain? This is something like out of a movie.
Yeah, Taker and Vince were right there for him and just hugged him, and it was definitely a standing ovation because it was an unbelievable performance. And people were concerned, first of all, for his well-being, thinking, how in the hell is he walking? How did he get up? When he had the tooth up his nose.
Crazy.
Well, we thought it was snot.
What's funny?
We thought it was a big loogie.
I watched this match this week and my person saw it for the first time and she said, is that his tooth in his nose? Yes.
Yeah, we thought it was snot at first.
How did it get there? The hard way. It's crazy.
Right through his lip.
This person's still alive. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's I like to point, as much as I love Mick, I like to point to some of the things Mick has done to young guys and say, you don't need to do this. And Mick didn't need to do it. He really didn't.
When he's in the back, and I guess we should talk about him because we have it here. You guys had like a chiropractor that people have asked a lot of questions about over the years, who was help adjusting guys. What's his role here in trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Francois Petit. And Francois Petit was a hybrid of a chiropractor, a kinesiologist. He did a lot of different crazy things, but a lot of athletes with unique injuries would often go to Francois and he would put them back together, manipulate their joints and their bones and everything. And, man, I've never been adjusted by anybody like Francois. He would hurt you. It hurt, but afterwards you felt better. And he we called him Dr. Petit or Francois. He was Sub-Zero in the Mortal Kombat movie franchise, and he was a stunt coordinator, things like that. More than anything, he was pretty much a crazy motherfucker. But he would pop guys back into place. I broke my ankle one time. He set my ankle, wrapped it, and I was done. and I could walk on the damn thing. He was amazing like that. It was hard to explain. There were stories about him doing, okay, now don't laugh, him doing open heart surgery on people and repairing arteries without obviously opening them up, just with his hands. And he would go in and do bypass surgery on people. That's real life.
The fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Those were the legends of Francois Petit. But guys would go and they would spend a couple days at his place in California. And that's how, we came about him, because he was putting people back together. And we thought, well, instead of having guys go to him, let's bring him to us. And those that want to use him can use him as a chiropractor and to help them with their injuries and help them rehab and different things like that. So, but he could pop a shoulder back in. It was always like, let me reduce it. I can reduce it. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Vince Russo was a big fan of old Francois. Russo would go out and spend vacation and weeks out with Francois in California, and tells a great story about Francois racing Warren Beatty on, the Sunset Strip somewhere in California. But he was this crazy doctor. The real doctor that we had was Dr. Frank Romascavage, and that was the guy with the long hair at the very end of it. And they point him out. That's Dr. Romascavage. He was the real doctor that was there that actually stitched Mick up. And
14 stitches in the lip he got. And I assume that's also who's pulling the thumbtacks out of his person.
That was Dr. Romascavage and Francois both, yeah, with pliers, little needle nose pliers, one by one.
That's what we're talking about right here. So there's even footage of McMahon going to congratulate him and thank him for everything he's done for the company. But he says something like, promise me I'll never see you do anything like that again. Did you have a conversation with Vince after the match? Or do you remember what the interaction was? I mean, it feels like there's some sort of edict that has to come down, like, we've let this shit go too far, no more.
Well, not only yes, there was. And it was also Vince recalling one of the reasons that he didn't want to hire Cactus Jack in the first place was because of the stuff that Cactus used to put his body through, and that Vince felt was unnecessary. So the fact that Vince let him do that, and he's kind of looking at himself in the mirror and says, damn it, we can't, I mean, he took responsibility for it. He goes, I can't let him do that do that to himself anymore. So it was brutal. A lot of soul searching.
And we're not done. As if that's not enough. Kane's out next, and he's taking on Steve Austin in a first blood match. Now, this is interesting because it's a first blood match, and one of the guys is completely covered. Arms, legs, hands, face. It's a first blood match. And the other guy, while he is the hottest star in the business, he's just spent 3 days in the hospital. It's pretty crazy to think about. Vince McMahon is watching this from the owner's box with Sable on his arm. And in the middle of the match, the cage starts coming down, and it gives the illusion that McMahon is behind it. And eventually, I guess we should mention here, what is the stipulation? If Kane doesn't win his world title shot here, obviously if Austin loses, Kane becomes world champion. What if Kane loses? What happens?
Bro, we're going to cover him in gasoline and set him on fire. And then he's gone forever. It's good stuff.
You help me understand how Vince McMahon co-signs this.
God damn it, pal. We're not going to actually do it. That's how.
I don't understand.
We're not going to do it. God damn. It's entertainment.
It's unbelievable is what it is. You guys had a set a motherfucker on fire step, which is just crazy. The match gets 3.25 stars. There is some fun stuff to watch here. One of the times when the cage is going up, Kane is laying across it, teeter-tottering, which is kind of fun to see a 7-footer do that. They're brawling everywhere. As we mentioned, Austin's fresh out of the hospital. He's got the elbow wrapped up. He's working with a staph infection here. Eventually, unbelievably, Mankind runs down to interfere with a chair. Eventually, the Undertaker shows up too, and he's limping along, and they're playing dueling chairs, and Mankind ducks a chair shot, which causes the Undertaker to hit Austin, who also had a chair. And then immediately Austin does the gimmick, and he is pouring blood like a major, he hit a vein. And in the middle of all this, the Undertaker goes and gets gasoline. This is real life, folks. The Undertaker gets
my
gasoline,
favorite part.
and he doesn't pour it on Kane. He says, fuck this, and he poured it on the Hebners. I don't know if maybe he got the Iggy that the Hebners were making fake merchandise or what, but he poured him full of gasoline. And now Austin's bleeding a river, and eventually everybody gets a stunner, and the referee comes to, and you think that Austin's going to win, but he sees Austin pouring blood. It's a first blood match. He calls for the bell. Your winner, new WWE champion, Kane.
Yes. God damn it. Good shit. And actually, when you watch it back, that was some pretty good shit. When you think about the peril that you put your champion in, having a first blood match with a guy that's covered head to toe with a leather mask, none of his extremities are exposed.
Not one.
He's talking with a voice box to his throat. We could have cut his throat, maybe. And if he bled there, no shit, the thing went up his neck too. Forgot about that.
Process what you just said. We could have cut his throat. You just flippantly just threw that out there.
Well, it could happen. Doop. So you put your champion in such peril that the odds are astronomical to overcome, but they're not going to put the title on this big red monster. So it was kind of must see. It's a must see event because how do you get out of it? And that's how we got out of it.
Serious business. It is something nobody saw coming. Austin is the hottest act there is. And we should remember, and this is sort of funny too, that it all sort of surrounds the Hell in a Cell. Of course, the Hell in a Cell was first put on the map at Bad Blood in October of 97. The match is Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and Kane interferes. That's where Kane makes his debut. Now, fast forward 8 months, and what do you know? Undertaker's in a Hell in a Cell, but now the Cell's involved, and he interferes in Kane's match, and Kane becomes world champion. It's weird the way it all sort of ties together, and Paul Bearer is in the middle of all of it. And we see a shot of Vince McMahon as the pay-per-view goes off the air. And it's sort of interesting because Meltzer sort of freestyles that giving that shot to Vince McMahon at the end of the show sort of gives him the credit for the title instead of having all that heat on Kane, Paul Bearer, or The Undertaker. Is he overthinking it?
Yeah, he's overthinking it, but that's where the heat was on Vince. And I think that to me, the most amazing thing about this match and this night is I'm sitting there watching it was old timer. You go, how in the hell do you follow the Hell in a Cell match that we just saw? How do you follow that? And not remembering it all. And I'm watching, man, Kane and Austin came out and had that crowd red hot. They were just on fire, no pun intended, for Stone Cold Steve Austin. They were into every single thing they did. There was no air taken out of the building. The crowd was into it from start to finish, and nobody predicted that outcome that night.
No, I mean, I don't think anybody did. I mean, it is a pretty big moment. I mean, Kane's only been in the company a handful of months. He's the world champion. He's beat the hottest guy. Austin's bleeding like a stuck pig. it's something else, man. I don't even know how to describe this match when you think about all the stuff that's going on, the fucking gasoline and everything in between. And as if that wasn't enough, as crazy as it is, Foley came back out.
Yeah. Yeah. And took a stunner.
Unbelievable. Let's get to Twitter. We asked you to ask some questions about King of the Ring 1998. It's one of the most historic shows in history, so we were not at a loss for questions here, Bruce. Are you ready?
Ready.
John wants to know, how far back was the plan for Kane to have a one-day title reign? Did they come up with it that day, or was it always the plan to pop a big rating the next night with Austin winning the title back?
Once they booked the match, the way they booked the match, and that was probably about 2 or 3 weeks out, that was the plan.
Efron wants to know, whose idea was it for the cell to come back down during the Austin Kane match?
Originally, I think it was Pat Patterson's idea to bring it back down, thinking that you're going to get a second cell match. You know, what if? And they did it.
Gulage wants to know, how was Steve Austin supposed to draw first blood with Kane since he had a mask and had his entire body covered?
That was the exact question we wanted people to ask. And if anybody could have figured it out, Stone Cold could have.
One of the questions I have, Conrad from Huntsville wants to know, first of all, shout out, and I think we have sort of glossed over this, shout out to Mick Foley, whether you agreed with it or not, for making sacrifices that nobody before or after ever has for the wrestling business, and all for the sake of our entertainment. Can we agree?
Oh, wholeheartedly we can agree. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's done.
Here's what I want to ask, though. In a weird way, does this match sort of ruin the Hell in a Cell? Because it does set an unrealistic expectation. I mean, you go back a handful of years when Charlotte and Sasha were in a Hell in a Cell and they were bragging that this is the first women's main event and blah, blah, blah. It's awesome. I agree. But there is an expectation where, I mean, even when Shane had this match with The Undertaker, you're like, well, he's got to come off it. I mean, it's just not just because he jumped off of stuff, but there's been a precedent set now, right?
There has been, and I felt that I felt the same way when Shawn did it. It's like, how do you top that? And guys are going to continue to try and top it. But I think that what they've done is they've kind of hit the reset button and gone, okay, we're not going to do that, and let's go back. And then Shane comes in, and Shane does the giant bump off the top. So yeah, it's a precedent that I think everybody that steps into a Hell in a Cell match wants to say, I'm going to outdo that. And that's a scary precedent.
You know, I think I had a moment watching this show because I haven't watched it in so long. And I had this about a year or two ago with Jericho that maybe without me paying attention, quietly, Jericho had become one of my all-time favorites. And I would say, oh, he's top 10 for me. And he wasn't even in the conversation a few years ago, but I think I just matured a little bit and had an opportunity to not be so steadfast and no, my favorites are this guy, and this guy. And I feel like I've sort of turned the corner on Cactus too, where now he's like, oh, he's in my top 10. And my question is, because we get this question a lot, various versions of this. Joshua wrote this one. I'll give you, for instance, Mick Foley minus this match, Hall of Fame career.
Yes.
I think so too. Like, I think so many times people just look at this match and say, this is it. And they don't really remember the empty arena match, the match with Royal Rumble with The Rock, the phenomenal matches he had 2
Shawn
months prior to the match with Shawn in Philadelphia. I mean, there's so many. I mean, don't even get me started on all the silliness he did in WCW. His matches with Vader. Oh God, that Halloween Havoc stuff and the stuff he did with Sting and the stuff he did in Japan with Funk. Even the stuff he did with Flair years after this in the company. His promos and stuff. He just continually evolved and showed you. And I think that's what maybe I was missing with Jericho. And I realized maybe I was missing it with Foley. Is there's so many different versions, and he evolved this character and his character so many times and gave you so many different dimensions of what he could do. I'm not knocking Stone Cold Steve Austin. I know people think I don't like him, but he's the badass. I mean, he's a badass, but at the same time, how many different versions did we see? And with Foley, man, you got 10 looks with the dude.
You did. And I'll tell you, again, you could just go back to, for me, when I knew that Mick was a player and the guy, was when he first came in and did the stuff with Undertaker right off the bat. When Undertaker came back excited, going, holy shit, man, his stuff looks crazy, but he's safe as fuck. And we went, okay, cool. We got something here. And it was the endorsement from Taker that said, okay, man, I want to do stuff with him. And then the match with Shawn in Philadelphia, where people thought, how are you going to get something out of this with that gimmick and with Shawn? And it was one of the best matches. You know, it's up there in that top 5 category, you know, of great matches of all time that you can go back and point to and say, that's something to watch because it was unique.
Racing Trends wants to know, what's up with the off their heads tagline for this show?
Off with their heads. That's what the Kings did back in the day, man. They used the guillotine and cut people's heads off.
Paul wants to know, what was the reaction backstage to Foley's fall?
Well, more people were more concerned with the fall, you know, and again, I think the wrestling fan that never had to take a bump in that ring or to know how hard it was for the non-giving bump through the cage, that was more of a, oh my God. Even more so, people were in awe and shocked, in the initial bump through the table. That was awe-inspiring. But the second one was one of more concern and more like, holy shit, he is broken in half.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense to me, too. Well, something that didn't make sense, Sergio brings up here. Why does the King always wear his tights to do commentary?
That's a great question. I don't know. Just because he's the King. And I think Jerry just always wants people to know that he was a wrestler.
James wants to know, was there ever any blowback from athletic commissions for matches like this or any sort of political fallout?
There was in certain places like Baltimore, Maryland, where they had an athletic commission, Kentucky, where there was an athletic commission, Oregon, but that's why we didn't do them in those spots.
Blake wants to know, was there ever any discussion of the Hell in a Cell match being retired after this night?
No, not that I can think of. And it was also something that was talked about to be used very sparingly as like a once a year attraction and not to use it a lot.
Stuart wants to know, why didn't Bruce have a singles run versus Paul Bearer?
Because people would have looked at that and in a shoot world, I'd have killed him within 20 seconds.
Because you're a
3-time Black Belt Hall of Fame.
Hey, let me ask this. We got lots of questions about this. There's a famous line from commentary, and you talked about it earlier, where JR says they killed him. Who do you think they was? A lot of people are sort of making assertions that it's a Freudian slip, and it's a reference to they being the wrestling business, whether it's the fans or the pressure, or maybe it's they, the bookers, and the guys making the decisions in the back. Or maybe it's they, the Undertaker.
It's they, the Undertaker. I don't think that, let's not get so deep here on conspiracy theory. JR was sending a message. No,
I don't think that. Undertaker. I just, it does sort of speak to, because Mick even wrote about it. He felt like he had to top the other match. Like he couldn't just go out and have a stinky match. I'm not saying this to be ugly, but there's a lot of guys who are like, bro, if that's what it takes and I have a bad match, I'm having a fucking bad match. Sorry. See you TV tomorrow. Because it's your job. And so he's like, no, I'm not having a bad match by any means necessary. I'm going to top that other one. People are going to be talking about this.
Well, that's kind of professional Mick was. And he felt that it was his responsibility to do that. But on JR, that was just, he meant the Undertaker. I don't think that there was anything else there.
Meltzer gave it 4.5 stars. How would you rate it?
You can't rate it. It was it was a defining match, and there was nothing to compare it to. So it was just truly one of those moments in time that people are going to look back to. And you mentioned it earlier, Andre Hulk. Andre Hulk was an attraction.
Right.
That wasn't a match you go back and go, oh my God, you got to see that spot where, right. No. This was a match where there are so many holy shit moments that they top one another, and the match itself is a story, and it tells a great story throughout the match of what's going to happen next and how is this man still standing. You rate it one of the greatest of all time.
Anthony brings up something we sort of glossed over. Any funny stories about Terry Funk kicking his shoe off after the choke slam? Which is kind of funny.
Damn. He choke slammed me out of my goddamn shoes. They came off because they weren't tied. Because when Terry ran down to the ring, his damn shoes weren't tied, and goddamn it, that son of a bitch. It was a good visual to me when you go back and you watch at the very end of the match, when Terry goes back out there to carry Mick back, you look and he's still just in his socks.
Maybe the dumbest thing I've ever seen on one of our questions. Hey, do you have a question? Sean wrote, JR really didn't need to oversell these bumps in the Taker Mick match. We saw them. We know they hurt.
Okay.
I mean, is this the most famous call in wrestling history? I'm being serious.
I thought that JR's call added so much to it. There was so much emotion there. And I think that the audience at home watching this was having pretty damn close to the same reactions that JR was having. JR's call was genuine, and you felt it. So, yes, I know we saw it, but I think that his call added that much more emotion to that bump and to that match.
Chat me up here, though. Most famous call in wrestling history? It's got to be.
One of, yeah.
What's bigger? I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm just saying every year, with hockey and especially football, there's going to be big hits throughout the season, and inevitably somebody is going to take that footage and put JR's call over the top of it.
Yeah. I you know what? Maybe for mainstream it may be, but I look at some of the Austin matches and Stone Cold.
Which one?
Weren't they all like that?
That's what I'm saying, though. If you can't pinpoint a one, then that's not one. That's not the most.
Well, I'll give you one. Was in Boston, WrestleMania, and Steve winning the title for the first time. In addition, Vince calling Shawn Michaels' entrance at WrestleMania 12, which is one of my most charismatic.
Oh, you mean the boyhood dreams come true?
The boyhood dreams come true, but also the entrance where he's coming down on the wire. And oh my God, look at him. He's the most electrifying, the most charismatic. He is the one, the only, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
It's Cobra Commander, just telling you. Well, listen, man, I don't know how else we can really describe this match. We've talked about it for a long time here, and there's no way we could do a show that even does this thing justice. They probably should have stopped this. They shouldn't have let him come back out. He shouldn't have taken the second bump. A lot of shoulda, woulda, couldas, but in the end, they made history, man, and nothing like this will ever be seen again.
I hope not.
For goodness sake, it shouldn't happen. But it is one of those deals where, as much as I can say it shouldn't have happened, I sure am glad it did, because this was awesome.
It was, and it's one of those moments in history that will, like you say, I I certainly hope that nobody ever, I certainly hope no one ever tops it, because it deserves to be up on the top of the mountain.
I'll tell you what, somebody who doesn't deserve to be up at the top of the mountain is the subject of our next Something to Wrestle. And we've talked about him for years now, and it's finally going to happen. July the 6th, set your calendar, boys and girls. We're talking about Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake. You know, this week was the best of times. Next week, it's the worst of times. I'm going to be using his book as our source material. Bruce, have you read his book yet?
I have not read his book yet.
Well, I have. Beefer was nice enough to send me a copy. And I got to tell you, it's a pretty damn good book. And we're going to go ahead and throw you up a link so you can check this out. So you'll have an idea of what we're going to talk about next week. But it's called Strutting and Cutting, the autobiography. It is available on Kindle as well. You can pick it up on Amazon, but we're going to go ahead and throw a link up. No, we're not getting paid to do this, but listen, if you're looking for source material on Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake, you'll take what you can get. All right. And this book is what we can get. So I recommend it. It is a pretty good book. It is what I'm going to be talking about next week here with Bruce. And, we're up against a really not great anniversary. Of course, this was the anniversary of Mick Foley nearly killing himself. Well, the 4th of July, which goes down next week, is when Brutus had his horrible accident. So we're going to talk about that accident that sort of derailed his career, and the good, the bad, and the ugly next week here on Something to Wrestle. And we'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with the Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake edition.
Hey guys, need to call a quick timeout here. Wanted to tell your listeners what I've been telling my listeners over at OU didn't know for a while now about all the cool things happening over at adsfreeshows.com.
On the debut episode of The False Finish, Chris Harris talks about his successful TNA run as one half of America's Most Wanted, and his not so successful run in WWE as Braden Walker.
To be honest with you, I wanted out. I mean, it wasn't, I was saying the right things to Johnny, like, hey, I'm going to make this work, but inside I was thinking, I hate this fucking place. It's broken me down. It's made me not love wrestling anymore. That's kind of when my drinking took a bad turn, and I really needed out.
Buff Bagwell joined Ad Free Shows members for a live Q&A, talking about his road to recovery and sobriety, and recovery from a broken neck.
We took an angle between me and Rick Steiner that could have been a unbelievably long angle, and they took that and just made it into a one-night match down Nitro, which I lost my debut match back with a broken neck. I feel like that was a bad call.
Who booked that shit?
That's just a small taste of what we got waiting for you. With 4 levels to choose from, see for yourself why Ads-Free Shows is the best value in wrestling today. Sign up now at adsfreeshows.com.